This is just a quick screencast on integrating quotes into your writing. We talked a little bit in the previous screencast on quote sandwiches and creating a quote sandwich and changing up your reporting verbs so that you can do that seamlessly into your literature. But there are essentially 4 ways that you can insert a quote into your writing. The first way is to introduce the quotation with a complete sentence in a colon. The key is it has to be a complete sentence if you're going to use the colon there. This example that I have for you here, Miss Mallard's innermost thoughts reveal her true feelings about this newfound freedom. Complete sentence, I'm using a colon, and then I'm introducing a quote that's also a complete sentence as well. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. So into open quotation mark, close quotation mark, and then you put your parenthetical citation at the end. For literature, short stories, dramas, those kinds of things, you would use the page number that you locate your information on. For poetry, you use the line number, line numbers. So you can use a range of numbers, and you just start off with the author's last name and the page number. Close the parentheses, and then the period at the end. The second way that you can introduce a quotation into your writing is to use an introductory or an explanatory phrase. It's not a complete sentence. You're going to separate it from the rest of the quotation with a comma. So the narrator states, she did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. You can use states, said. I gave you a list in that quote sandwich screencast that I went through. Some different things that you can use as kind of a reporting verb that you can use there in a introductory or an explanatory phrase. Same concept. You're going to use your quotation marks to open and close your quote. Save all your punctuation for the end outside of your parenthetical citation. They're still working with a short story in this particular example, so I'm using the page number and I'm closing everything out after the parenthetical citation with my ending punctuation. You're going to always use a comma when the introductory or explanatory phrase ends in a reporting verb like says, said, thinks, recalls, asks, questions, etc. Even if it's your own words and not an author, speaker, character, you're always going to use a comma. The third way is to make the quotation a part of your own sentence without any punctuation between your own words and the words that you're quoting. The narrator seems to suggest that even though she had loved him, sometimes she could envision a better future without him. So I'm sandwiching that quote in my own text there. And the key word in that particular sentence is the word that. Anytime you see the word that, you do not need a comma. It doesn't need to be set off from a comma. You can integrate it seamlessly without having to have a comma there. So what's boxed there in green is my words. You notice that I dropped the quote in, and then I add a comma after that because it's part of that introductory phrase. And then I'm back to my own words there at the end with she can envision a better future without him. Now you notice that I didn't stop, even though the quote happens in the middle of my my text. I didn't stop to do my parenthetical citation there because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of my sentence. I'm just saving it to the end. I'm going to stick it at the end because it works. I didn't add any other quotes within there. But if you did have multiple pieces of different quotes put together, you could still save your citation, your parenthetical for the end, and you could use a range of page numbers or line numbers if you're doing poetry. The last way is to use short quotations, only a few words as part of your own sentence. With keen and bright eyes, she strode from the room carrying herself like a goddess of victory. I'm just using short bits and pieces of quotations that I'm pulling from the text, and I'm integrating them into my own sentence. I'm still going to cite them the same. I'm going to make sure that I always use those those quotation marks to set aside the author's text from my text. I'm giving credit there, and then I'm going to include that parenthetical citation. That parenthetical citation is so important to make sure that you're avoiding plagiarism. A few last tips: don't rely too much on just one type of integration. Vary your methods up, because if you're using the exact same formula every time, like the author says, it gets very redundant, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. Capitalize quote only if it is a complete sentence. We only capitalize sentences that are complete complete. So you're going to treat quotes the same way. Only if it's a complete sentence does it get a capital letter. If it's not a complete sentence, obviously it does not get capitalized as such. Make sure that you always introduce the author, speaker, character, story, poem in your paragraphs, because you need to, and I just move this down just a little bit, sorry about that. You have to always give credit, even with properly cited parenthetical citations. You still need to introduce the author, speaker, the story in your paragraph, so that you're not coming out of left field with your quotations.